We consider ourselves pretty artistic around the old Appel household, and my wife, one of her favorite things is dance. That's right, she is part of this super cool African-inspired drum and dance ensemble, and one of the cool things we get to do a lot of the times is costuming. So today on Man Sewing, I'm going to show you how to make their easy wrap skirt we call the Lapa. Let's get started. Now, a Lapa is a lot like a sarong, but it has a belt attached to it. So we're going to make a very, very simple version of this today, and I'm going to show you how to make and install the belt, as well as how to cut down a standard piece of 45-inch goods. So today we're using this awesome print called New Wave by Carol Breyer-Fowlert, one of my all-time favorite quilt makers. Carol, one of these days, I hope I get to meet you. So if you're watching this video, send me an email, please, rob@mansewing.com, so we can have coffee together, right? I'm buying. Now, back to this, and we have a link down in the description below where you can get this in a bazillion different colors. It's fantastic. But we also have some of the basic instructions of what we're doing today. So if I'm going a little fast because I'm super wound up as always, don't worry, just go ahead and print this out and you can see what we're doing with the math and the numbers. But we're going to take 1.5 yards, which is 54 inches of this print, straight off of the bolt. And we are going to prepare to cut it. We're going to start by making the belting. So as this comes straight from our local quilt shops, right, you have the selvages here on both sides. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold this, and I'm focusing on my folded edge. I want to make sure that that part stays as crisp as possible. And I'm going to be cutting the selvages off, so I'm now positioning it so that it's ready for my right-handed cuts. And I'm going to fold this one more time. Now, the girth of the skirt is going to be a bit dependable on your height. So we're going to be able to adjust that towards the end of the tutorial. Right now we're just making the belting, so I'm coming down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm looking at my ruler along the fold that I've created. So I have a nice and crisp cut this way. And we're just going to remove the selvages. I've got several layers in here, so I'm going to push nice and hard with a sharp rotary blade. And of course, you also notice my hand is out of the way in case my blade were to jump there. We're going to set that aside. The next thing we're going to want 2 cuts that are 5 inches, right? So first thing we're going to do here is now I'm going to spin this. And this is my clean edge now. So I'm going to lay my ruler on here so that it is 5 inches here. And if you're not sure if you folded it correctly, the best thing you can do to double check is open this up and make sure that you have 2 that are cut at 5 inches, because that's exactly what we needed. The 2 by 54 inches created. The rest of this that is left behind becomes the body of the skirt, right? Okay, so I'm just going to now set that aside for a few moments, and we're going to start by making the belting. Get some of this stuff out of the way. And the easiest way to make the belting is we're going to join these 2 pieces on the bias. And one of the fun tricks when you're joining things on the bias is you have one piece of fabric laying. I'm just going to call this horizontal. Then this next piece of fabric is going to touch, and these are right sides together. And these are going to lay now vertical, and I'm going to sew from this top edge down to this bottom edge. Now when I'm doing it with my binding, it's a little easier because I'm only dealing with about 2.5 inches worth. So for the trick I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring this over to my iron, and I'm going to set a crease in this piece of fabric so I have a good visual of where I'm going. So I was coming from this top edge down to the bottom edge, so I'm going to fold it over like this, and I'm squaring up my outside edge here. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of a warm iron on top of that. And what that does is it sets my seam allowance so that I can see it. Okay, now I bring this right back over here. And we're going to go to the machine and we're going to stitch from the top down. Make sure you have both pieces of fabric secure. Okay, and now once that is trimmed, another good thing to do to make sure you've gotten it right before you cut it is you want to open it up and make sure that you're on the bias and you have a long strip that has started to form, okay? Once you know you have it cut right, we're going to trim off this excess, and we can do it just like we're making our quilts with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm laying the ruler there. Whoop, and I'm taking the blade off of the cutter. We're going to pause for a small commercial break while I go ahead and take care of that. Now that the blade is securely back on the rotary cutter, we're going to cut that line with my 1/4 inch, right? Just like that. We'll set those aside for another project. And now we're ready to start building our belting. We're going to tri-fold this, meaning I want to sew 1 inch here and the other edge, or I'm going to say iron it that way. Make it easiest on myself though, let's fold this in half and set a center line so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so as I have both of those raw edges now pressed towards the center so we can just fold this over as we get ready to stitch, let's talk about building the body of the Lapa before we can put our belt on. So I need the piece that I cut those edges off, and it's very simple, but take a minute. Slow down. Remember, the length, the 54 inches, goes around us this way because we want to be able to wrap it at least once and a half if possible. So the edges I'm talking about right now are these outer edges, which should be about 35 inches because we cut about 10 inches off when we made the belt. It's a really easy process. You're just going to fold over. I'm going to call it 1/4 inch, and then a second time, just like this, and go right into your sewing machine here and just run a nice straight stitch right down the edge of that. And you're going to do it on both sides so that when it's all done, it looks just like this. Okay, so you can see there's that finished edge as I was working, and I have it on this side. And I have it on this side. There you go. Now we're going to put the belt in, and we need to find the center top of our fabric. So if this print had a direction, right, like it was little drums or something fun like that all along the print, you would want to make sure you're working on the top edge. I'm going to simply go ahead and just kind of put a little finger press. I could hit it with my iron if I wanted to. I just kind of want to know where the halfway mark is. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to know where the halfway mark is on my belt as well. So I'm going to set it like this, come back around, and we can trim the edges of our belting off also to make this adjustable when we're done, or adjustable to your body size. So I'm not worried about finishing those edges yet. We're going to get to that at the very end. Once I found center here, I'm going to spin this around like this. Okay, then what's going to happen is I'm going to lay that just like this, raw edge and everything. That's right, we're not even going to worry about finishing this upper edge. We're just going to close this belt over. And what I want to do is I want to put several pins in here to secure where I'm working. And I'm going to be stitching it from this top side so I can see what's going on. So that means that I want my bobbin thread to be set up to match on the outside of my Lapa as well. And I'm going to pin, let's say, about every 10 to 12 inches. And what I'm doing with my fingers right now is I'm feeling in here with my fingers that this top edge of the belt and the bottom edge of the belt are lining up. So it's all secure and it's ready to go to the sewing machine. I want to think about what's going to be the easiest way for me to stitch this. So the easiest way for me to stitch this is from the top down with all of the body of the Lapa and the belting and everything over on this side. Again, there's many a way to skin this cat. Easiest for me is to start all the way up here at the edge of the belting. Folding it in half so that there's no longer any raw edges, and we're going to lay this thing right into the presser foot, and we're just going to start stitching away. I'm not even going to back stitch here because that's going to be trimmed off. Now the nice thing about doing this right now is it's going to give us the opportunity to make sure that our thread and our needle and everything is organized and that the stitch is laying right where I want it on the belting. So I'm looking, and the edge of the belting is very, very close to the edge of the presser foot. It's like the opposite of a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And here we go. I'm going to jump into caffeinated mode. Okay, and now we are just about 2 inches away from where the belt meets the beginning of the Lapa. So I'm just making sure everything is nicely organized. I'm looking at the edge here, and I'm just going to go ahead and begin sewing. And I'm going to take my time, and I'm using my fingers. I'm pinching with my finger and my thumb over here a couple inches back to make sure that nothing is shifting around, so that I'm capturing both edges. We don't sew over pins, so I'm pulling that out as the pin touches the presser foot. And we're just going to keep running this down. I've got a lot of focus right now on the pinch of the fabrics between my finger and my thumb, so that when I'm done, the whole thing is stitching, and you can probably see this real nice. It's catching the edge of the belting right there on the outside. So this is why I'm saying you want your bobbin thread to be something that matches very nicely on the outside, because it's the bobbin thread that will show on the outside of your costuming or your wardrobe there. So I finished off the belting, and it's completely secured. We no longer have any raw edge at all up in the top of our Lapa. Turned out really, really good, if I may say so myself. We have the finished edges on both of the sides, so we only have 3 raw edges left. We have the bottom of the Lapa, which we'll adjust once we try it on, and the tails of the belt we need to deal with once we've tried it on as well. So to try it on, the way this works here is it's going to start by going around our back. Then we're going to put one of the ties, and we wear it right above our hips, right here, but I might make sure the tie comes out. Then this comes around like this way. And of course, I should have probably taken my cell phone out. You can feel it on my hip there. Now, if you want, or if you're not a 58-inch waist like I am, haha, you could technically tie it in the front, but most of us will just take this and we're just going to tie it in the back. So the belting here has gotten myself secured, and I know that once I've gotten my loops created in the back, that I still have extra tail that I can cut off, so I know that I can trim that there. And then I'm just looking down, and I realize that it's going to hit me. I want this to come just below my knees, so I can take about 1 inch off of the bottom, but I'm just going to fold that and sew it instead of cutting it and then sewing it, just to make life easy. So let's talk about how to finish these belt ends, right? So if I want to finish the belt ends, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a clean edge. Okay, so we're just going to take a second and clean that up. From that point on, I'm just going to go ahead and pinch inside and start to push. And a lot of times I'll grab a little scissor or something to push all of that raw edge into the inside of the belt, and then we'll just top stitch it closed. So this won't have any raw edges, so it won't keep unraveling. Now that that's turned in there, I'm just going to come in here and stitch across the top. And I'm going to take 2 layers all the way back and a little bit forward, and that locks all that in. And then I'll just trim off those thread tails. And of course, you want to do that to both sides. And then for the bottom, all you would do, and I find it's easiest when I'm dealing with the bottom, to simply take this up here, and I'm going to fold it up once and stitch it. Try it on one more time to make sure I know right where I want it. And then I could adjust it by 2 inches, 3 inches, or anything like that. And the heavier the hem, the more it's going to drape down towards the bottom. So that ends up working out real nice. So it doesn't get much easier than that, does it? Today's tutorial is almost wrapped up. I'm going to point out these are also a great beach cover up. And I do believe I hear the beating of the drum. So I got to jam, and we'll catch you next time here at Man Sewing.